Good morning,
Good
everyone.
morning, everyone. It's time to wake up
And smell the rosin.
Yay. And today we have a very special guest, Eddy Malave, who's tuning in a little bit. Esther, what were they supposed to have ready? Remind what, well, maybe they can gather their stuff while we're practicing.
Yes. So today we have a very special presentation because we have our guest, Eddy Malave, who's going to join us here in a minute. No rush. We are going to be doing an Alexander technique show. So this is going to be involving Alexander technique, which is a gentle approach that aims to re-educate the mind and the body through a series of movements so the body uses its muscles more efficiently. And that's a definition that I really like of Alexander technique. But basically, we're going to have the opportunity to learn more about our bodies, how our muscles move, how things work, how things are set up. And it's really going to be useful for you, no matter if you're a musician or not. Whatever you do, this is going to be super helpful for anything that life brings you. Even if it's just sitting in an office, there are ways to do it ergonomically, and there are ways to do it in which you're using your body in the right way. And it decreases chances for injury, decreases, chronic pain, all those things, learning how to use your body correctly. I did a little bit of Alexander technique before at a summer festival called Meadowmount a few years ago. And even though I didn't go super in depth, just the things I learned on the surface really changed a lot of the way that I played the cello, and even just the way I operated in daily life. So we're really excited to present this to you guys, because it's just such an amazing opportunity to be able to learn about this, especially for free. So make sure you share this with people. It's really great.
In fact, that's what I was doing right now. I didn't mean to. Yeah, I wasn't just fiddling with my phone. I was sending the links to everyone I know, just to make sure that no one misses it.
But so the things you'll need. So make sure to have a paper and pencil handy. So have some paper, have a pencil or a pen. Some books for head support. I have some books over there. And then a yoga mat or a towel to lay down on, and a chair to sit in. So those are the things you need to have with you. So pencil, paper,
fantastic,
yoga mat, chair, and some books. So I will be the guinea pig for the day. I'm excited.
I'm on spring vacation. I'm not doing anything today.
It was funny. Because I really like this kind of stuff. And so I'm down to be the guinea pig. Awesome. It's gonna be fun. So
guys, also please feel free, as always. The reason we love the live format is because you guys, if you have any questions, feel free to let us know in the chat, and we might not interrupt the presentation right away, but feel free to send the questions. We will make sure and go over the questions at an appropriate time if we don't feel, but we would love to address as many questions as possible, because if you're doing something and you're not sure if you're doing this correctly, then this is your chance to ask an expert. Eddy Malave is an amazing violist, concert violist. He's been a performer, and I think he's based in New York City, right? And so we're gonna let him tune in and just talk to you guys about his amazing experience as Alexander technique specialist and as a performer and so on.
Awesome. So Eddy, if you want, you can go ahead and turn on your camera and mic, but if you're still getting ready, no worries. We'll just chat.
Yeah. It's a beautiful
here.
Hi, Eddy. Hi, Eddy. How's the weather there?
It's a beautiful day today.
The same
here too.
How nice.
Yeah, I think spring is knocking on the door.
Indeed.
It's lovely. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody can see me. I'm not too dark.
Yeah, no, you're good. We can see you very well. And we can hear you very well.
Scoot in a little bit.
Sure.
There we go. Yeah, get you in the frame there.
Yeah, for a little bit.
All right. Oh, Michael Fossum is here. Good afternoon.
Hi. Thank you so much for tuning in.
We've got 7 people already.
Yay, that's wonderful. So get ready, guys, for a really fun, a lot of useful information from a very from an expert in the field. That's what I'm trying to say. A very good friend of ours, virtual friend,
Yes. Yes.
upon each other in the virtual world, and
Yeah.
so excited. For those who are just tuning in, maybe didn't hear it, you need what? Hopefully you can have
Paper and pencil, a yoga mat or a towel, a chair,
the books for
and
some
some
heads.
books for
Yeah.
head support.
So I think that's it. So that's it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I can start with
Yeah.
introducing myself. But before I do that, I am going to ask, and we'll, you guys feel free to remind the audience for those who are just coming in again. Believe it or not, I'm going to ask you guys to write on the top of the piece of paper observation and awareness.
Ooh, I like that.
Just write on top of the paper observation and awareness. And believe it or not, I know this sounds a little interesting, but we're going to make a comparison towards the end. I'm going to ask you to write a one word description of how you feel right now. Meaning, do you feel tired? Do you feel tight? Do you feel energetic? Whatever the one word description can be, just off the top of your head. And we'll revert back to all of this by the end.
Is it
I'm already
like
changing my mind big time.
mentally or physically or both?
both,
Could
both,
it
or
be just a mood?
could be a mood. It's like just because everything's integrated. You'll see where I'm going with this towards the end.
I almost said mentally.
We're talking integrated. He was just saying
Yeah,
integrated, so you
it's a
integrated.
good word, Yeah. I love it. I love it. And then with that, we'll just refer back to this. We're going to be taking little notes throughout the whole time, and I even have my little notes right over here, so you'll see me
Awesome.
referring to this just a little bit because I basically have everything so in my blood when I'm saying this. So those of you who are just joining us, I want to say a welcome, and my name is Eddy Malave. I am, as the girls were mentioning, I'm a professional violist. I went to Juilliard since I was, long time, and got all my degrees from there. And I was motivated by the Alexander technique to become an Alexander teacher simply because I'll just give you a brief background on my story. I was actually playing through pain, let's just say. And I've been very fortunate. I know that there are some people that have this words of tendonitis or carpal tunnel syndrome. Mine was simply for shoulder pain or shoulder region pain. And you'll see what I'm referring to later when I actually switched that around a little bit, shoulder region. And it was basically I had a very poor setup, chin rest and shoulder rest. And I was having a lot of problems, which I couldn't see myself since I was a teenager going through a whole conservatory education, then to suddenly have to give it up just because I couldn't figure out how to get out of pain. And there's been many stories in our lives that you've heard of people who rehabilitated themselves from severe injuries. So I kind of that was my impetus to actually say I need to figure this out. I became an Alexander teacher. I then became certified in the Suzuki violin viola method, and then I actually with the certification with body mapping. So my trajectory is still the perpetual student and teacher. That's basically a little bit of my background. I'll let you know that this work actually saved my performing career. I play on Broadway. I sub with orchestras in Lincoln Center. I do chamber music. I mean, very exhausting life before March 2020. I mean, we're talking 6, 7 days a week going. And then plus I teach Alexander Technique at Steinhardt NYU, and then I teach Suzuki at Third Street Music Settlement in the East Village in Manhattan, in New York City. So it's like very full life. So now, without further ado, I actually am gonna. I just figured to give you a little bit of background of who I am and what I do, and I'm still playing. It's not that I'm just. It was a thing of the past. I integrated everything in a healthy approach. So moving forward, and it's so funny that Esther was in Metamount. I was a Metamount kid for 5 summers. But they didn't have Alexander Technique when I was there. But still,
Yeah.
like I loved it. Montreal every weekend, like it was just a wonderful place to be. But so I'll go with a little bit of a definition because usually when I'm in a live audience, I usually say, what is the Alexander Technique, and has anyone heard of it? And you'll get some people, raising their hands. I like to give an academic definition of what the Alexander Technique is. The Alexander Technique is a re-education of your posture through movement and breathing. That's what I like to generally give that to people, so this way there's something that they can concretely understand. It's a re-education of your posture through movement and breathing. And we're going to go through some explorations together um, with this. So I'm going to actually say for this whole idea of posture, right away, we'll just get right into it. I'm going
Yeah,
to,
I'm like
I know, right?
not
Yeah.
Well,
setting.
we're going to go into this thing of this idea of posture. It's a re-education of one's posture. Let's see if we can integrate our idea of what it as opposed to what is so. Meaning, you've always heard get yourself into what you I believe to be in a good posture. You're just going to sit in your chair in a good posture, right? Feels pretty normal, right? And we're going to start to use observation and awareness. And then I'm going to use a word. I will have a disclaimer. This very word, Alexander himself did not like. But I am going to use a specific word and see what happens when I use this word. And there was a specific reason why he didn't like this word. I'm going to use the word relax. I'm going to ask you to relax out of this good posture, out of your idea of a good posture. Aha! This is great. Great. So, can either of you, because usually if we were in a larger room, but with you guys, I would like to know, can you verbalize what happened to your system when I used the word relax? Did you move any place? Anything release or anything of that sort?
Kind of collapsed.
Yeah,
Like,
I
so,
stopped
yeah.
holding my core.
Yeah.
I like my back is like leaning against the chair.
Yeah, I'm just kind of bent because I don't have a back on my chair. So I'm like a question mark, basically.
That's hilarious. So with that, I am going to ask you. I'm going to pull some words out and see if it makes any sense to you, if it was relatable. Did any of you, and those of you who are watching, did you notice in space? Did you happen to move back or down? Did you let go of any muscular holding patterns? Your legs, your gluteus, neck. All right. So that's an observation. We're using observation and awareness. Now, guess what? We're going to make a comparison, and I'm going to ask you to get into that idea of a good posture again. Now, in highlighting and really enhancing the idea of observation and awareness, is are you? I'm going to ask, are you stiff anywhere? What is your observation right now?
Yeah, my neck, I feel like in the back of my neck I get stiff, and I actually like had a problem with tension headaches at one point because of like stiffness in the back of my neck. So like I'm not surprised that I'm feeling
Okay.
that.
Yeah, I tend to look always a little bit down when I sit straight, and that definitely tenses my neck. And I don't know if that's just a habit from being a violinist or the phone, but I notice if I let myself relax, then my head goes higher. But if I
And
don't, normally I have a tense, normally it's like this, and so definitely tension in my neck.
So, okay, great. But so now that we've made a comparison from the first time I asked you to do something that you thought was very normal and natural, well, I should say normal. I should say normal. And I gave you a word that gave you a cue to actually release any of that. So you realize he's like, well, let's get back into the good idea of a good posture, but maybe it's really not a good idea of a good posture. And what we do, you can let that go, everybody at home as well. Just be comfortable in your chair. But working with an Alexander teacher does help you to release from the inside out, right? And that you can only achieve that working with an Alexander teacher, a series of lessons. And I'll give you a little bit of a background of who Mr. Alexander was for those of you who actually have no idea who he was. I find it very actually fascinating, and I find his time because the years that he was born. F.M. or Frederick Matthias Alexander himself, he was born in the year of 1869 in a small town, not a village, but a town called Northwest Wynyard in the heart-shaped island of Tasmania, which is just south of Australia. So if you think about it, if you go on your Google map and use like, there's Tasmania, 1869, Northwest Wynyard, and he died in London, England, in the UK in 1955. So during his young life, it's very well written about. That's why I was saying about the word relax. He wrote very well documented. He was a monologist, and a monologist is a fancy way of saying he was a Shakespearean actor, and he was very, very passionate about it, to the point where he actually did very well. And I'm talking to the point where he was making money going around the big cities giving recitations of Shakespearean plays. And he was actually pretty famous. So, of course, with that, his personality, a little bit of an ego, actor type, this type of thing. But along the way, after, those of us who are performers and those of you who are watching who are not performers, I think when you do something over and over again, say that you are in an office chair or say that you are an instrumentalist, to some degree, and it is normal to have some little aches and things and stuff like that, but you can learn to work yourself out of it, right? Well, he was noticing that every time there was this period of time where he was actually become hoarse more often after a recitation. And again, I'm always talking about the years that he was alive, 1869, 1955. This is before electricity as we well know it today. I mean, can you imagine being like without walking, without this? They didn't have that back then. So no microphones. So this can give you a little bit of a picture of how he was actually performing. Well, he became friends with doctors very quickly just to see that he was like, listen, my career is on the line because it's starting to crescendo. Every time he would perform, giving a recitation, he would become hoarse. So there was one particular, and he would drink lotions and potions and all, hang upside down and do all these things just to recover, and he did. That's why he was able to give another, stellar performance every single time. He would go up and then take a couple steps back, go up and take a couple steps. So there was one performance which was I think the crux of something. What we now have is Mr. Alexander's technique, is that there was what we would consider a Carnegie Hall debut, or back in the day a town hall debut, and all these agents were invited to see him perform and basically say, show us what you got, and he wanted to get more gigs. And he went to his doctor friend in particular and said, I got this thing, rest your voice. And the doctor said, rest your voice, do this and that. He did everything. And up comes the performance. And kind of a perfect storm happened. He starts to recite, and the first half goes really well, as it's told and written, that the second half of the performance, he starts to recite, and he started to get the hoarseness back. But then it went a step further. In front of a packed house, he completely lost his voice. So I think it was a combination of, being excited, actually being nervous. All of us who are performers can relate to being nervous, and then trying to control a situation that was out of control. This actually, as you well know, devastated him, and it's very well documented. Again, I'm not a doctor. I wasn't there, but I don't know if he was clinically depressed from it, but he was extremely emotionally distressed for a better part of the year because he just didn't know what was going on. He was still able to, pick himself out of bed and still pursue life and still perform, but there was a part of him that just was so devastated, he just didn't know what to do. And this is a clear example of someone going against all odds. I mean, I'm not saying that I moved mountains with myself when I told you my little story in the beginning, but I was like, I went through, all these degrees, and I'm not going to stop because this is something I really love to do. And I worked in figuring things out to heal my body and create, healing patterns. And now, I'm able to still play. I don't have any issues, so to speak. Do I have to stretch? Absolutely. That's, we're human. We're organic. We have to, that type of thing. But you can understand that Mr. Alexander was very devastated by this particular incident that happened. So he marched to his doctor friend, and they were having a pretty lively, conversation. He was like, doctor, like, what's going on? And the doctor was like, we've exhausted everything. We've done from lotions and potions and hanging upside down, all these steps. I'm, of course, exaggerating when I say that, but it just, they've done all these different things to try to make something heal from him, and they couldn't figure out what it was. And this is where Alexander asked, he said, do you think it's something that I'm doing? And the doctor actually said, probably we need to look into that. So Mr. Alexander, being a scientific bent of mine, he went out from the doctor's office and went to the store and got 3 large mirrors. So if you look at what I use the word orthodox Alexander lesson, with an Alexander teacher usually work with mirrors because of this very reason. It's to
Okay.
actually use the senses, which we're going to talk about in just a second. It's, to look, to observe. That's why we use observation and awareness to see what's going on. And he installed three large mirrors in his apartment. And as he says it took him a period of 9 years to complete and cultivate what we now have as Mr. Alexander's technique. Those of you who still don't know what the technique entails, it does have, it's an in-person experiential experience, meaning what the things that we're going to do today is just to give you a little idea of using the power and the power of the mind and engaging the mind in a different way that you normally don't do. So I like to say we go from the normal to the natural. Taking an Alexander lesson with a teacher, you do have hands-on, but it's not a massage, it's not yoga, it's not meditation, it's gentle hands. And Alexander teacher's hands are there to suggest space and width and lengthening. We're not there to massage in that sense. So that's the magic of an Alexander lesson. And I used the word earlier, an orthodox lesson, when you work with a teacher who does have mirrors, so this way you can observe yourself as you're internally understanding the releases that are happening. So I will talk to you about the senses because they play a large role within this type of work. The Alexander technique falls into the somatic world, meaning the study of human movement. This, we have Feldenkrais and cranial sacral work and all that, but the Alexander technique and body mapping, by the way, which I'll introduce to you pretty shortly, does fall into the somatic works. And I think it's fascinating, since those of us who are musicians that are watching, we don't think of ourselves as movers, and we should make a shift in that mentality. We are movers. We might be movers of many muscle groups, but we're movers. So I mean, would a athlete, for an Olympic athlete, just go not take care of, just eat junk food the whole time? No, they have to fuel their body to create energy. We have to figure out how to maintain and prevent. That's what I think is my goal in life. I don't walk on water. I actually have my own issues, and if I'm not navigating my life in a specific way. So that's my little speech there with that. So, but I want to talk to you about the senses. You know how where it's very easy to rattle off the five senses. Most of us would think we have five. Actually, Alexander did not discover it, but he was like, he highlighted it. He was like, wait a minute, there's something else going on. We have a sixth sense, and it's called you can write this down, it's called the kinesthetic sense. And that's a sense that I think that you would like to highlight in your own personal lives. And I'm going to approach the sixth sense in three different ways because I want you to know that it exists.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to place a hand right behind your head. You don't have to touch, but you're going to place a hand behind your head. And I bet you that you, without using your eyes, you'd be able to start to verbalize, to describe how the hand is. Is your palms cupped? How is your fingers pointing or straight? The wrist. You'd be able to visualize without actually looking. That's your kinesthetic sense. It's the sensation of from your muscles, right? I'm going to ask you to start wiggling your fingers. You're going to start wiggling your fingers, and I'm going to stop. And I'm going to ask you to stop. And I'm going to take my fingers out, and I'm going to say, would your fingers be like my fingers? Would you be able to
No.
describe? Right. So that's interesting that you're able to be able to sense that. That's one approach of understanding what your kinesthetic sense is. Now I'm going to ask you to take, you can take your hand in front. I'm just going to demonstrate once. Take off my glasses. I'm going to ask you to take a finger on your nose, and your eyelids are closed. And I'm going to ask you then to bravely explore. You're going to take your finger up to the ceiling and point it up to the ceiling. And then you're going to bend the elbow joint and bring that first finger back to your nose. And then you're going to take the first finger and curl to your left. It's as if you're hugging or pointing around your shoulder region. And then you're going to bring the first finger back to the nose. And notice that you're able to bring the first finger back to the nose without little or no difficulty whatsoever. I'm going to ask you to take your first finger and point out to the left, comfortably out to the left, and then bend the elbow to bring curling back the first finger back to the nose, And if you notice, then you can gently open your eyes, and you can notice you didn't need to use your eyes to notice that you were able to bring your finger back, right? That's another heightened sense. Oh, pardon, pardon.
I was just saying, it wouldn't look pretty if I had to cross my eyes to look at my nose, so I better not.
Right, but you're able to do it, right? So that's something that's interesting on a muscular level. Now we're going to do an exercise comparing the kinesthetic sense to combining imagination, which that's another controversial thing within the Alexander community, because there are teachers who don't feel that imagination is appropriate. I think since we are artists, we're always referring to imagination all the time, so I think this is a really good thing. So again, just like we did that good posture idea, doesn't matter which finger that you're going to use. I'm going to ask you to actually deliberately point a finger up to the ceiling, just like this. And then I'm going to ask you to notice how that feels using your observation and awareness. Now you're going to use your eyesight, and we're going to combine imagination. You're going to let that first finger curl and at rest. So there should be essentially no
Oh,
tension
okay.
in the hand or anything like that. And what you're going to do is you're going to imagine that there's a magic rope that's attached to that first finger. That magic rope is all going all the way through your ceiling, all the way into the sky.
Okay.
And you're going to let this magic rope start to lead that first finger up towards the ceiling. And you're going to watch the knuckles from the finger coming from the palm of the hand, and watching the knuckles lead, uncurl, as that magic rope is leading that first finger pointing up towards the sky through to the universe. And then I'm going to ask you to notice if there's a difference. And if, since the both of you can actually verbalize, I'm going to ask, and everyone's experience is going to be different, by the way. There's no right or wrong way, but everybody, those of you who are watching at home, can both of you individually share what your experience was between the first time you did this and the second time using that magic rope imagination sense?
I think the first time, like, I was just kind of like, okay, there, you know, but this time it was like I was a lot more mindful about how my joints were moving and how it felt. And in doing that, it actually felt more relaxed the second time.
Yeah.
And the first time I was like, kind of like, I'm kind of double jointed, and I was kind of like,
Mhm.
just like,
Ah,
bracing my joints, locking them.
Mhm.
And this time it was just a more relaxed, like, point.
Yeah.
great.
I felt that the first time I did it, I only was aware of my finger, and I felt like my finger was the one who was doing all the actions. So I was leading with the finger because you mentioned the finger. So the finger felt very stiff and kind of tight.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the word, that static? Like I couldn't move it or anything. Like it would have been stuck in this position. Now, when you brought up the rope, what I realized that actually I felt more of the muscles that were inside working, moving my fingers. So I didn't, it's weird because this part of my finger was completely relaxed. And I was actually, and before we mentioned, when I started imagining rope, that was the first thing that went, this first, the knuckle first.
Yeah.
And then little by little leading from there. So I felt like almost like it was all, most of the effort was happening here. And so my finger wasn't really so much of an issue. It was kind of following my muscles. So the end result, it felt very flexible. It didn't feel static. It felt that I could move it anytime I wanted to, very quickly, if I need to adjust it.
I think that's wonderful. And those of you, by the way, some people, thank you for those descriptions and feedback, because and there's some people who actually they've actually said the second time is stiffer. That's why I'm saying everyone's very, very individual. But guess what? It's that thought or imagination is what we call a kinesthetic imagination, and it has a muscular effect. So you notice that we're connecting the mind to the physical in an intentional way. One was just like, just do it, and then we're using imagination, and whatever anyone's individual experience was is everyone's individual experience. So now we've introduced this idea of posture, and we've introduced this idea of the kinesthetic sense, which is our sixth sense, and I hope that everybody remembers that for the rest of their lives, because it's very, very important to do that. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to encourage you guys. We're going to take this into movement a little bit now, because we want to move the body in your chair. Esther, you might move back a little bit so this.
I'm gonna go to my the white chair is not
Yeah.
here. Let me go get the white
I'll
chair.
get it. I'll get it.
Oh, you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're
So
just gonna everybody in your chair. That those of you who are watching, we're gonna do what's called chair work, and this is based on an Alexander lesson. And yeah, this is great. Thank you. So you can sit down.
Out of the picture for now. I'm still here. I'm just out of the picture.
Yes. So what everybody's gonna do, and then you can see Esther leading by example. You're just actually just gonna stand up out of the chair, and then you can sit down. And when you're doing this, everybody might be like wondering, okay, it's nice to stand up and sit down, but I'm gonna ask you to stand up and sit down a couple more times. And notice that it's a very natural, normal thing to do, right? We do this thousands of times per day, millions of times throughout our lifetime, right? It's a movement, right? Now, using observation and awareness, I'm going to ask you to place a hand directly in the neck, on the neck, and place a hand in the lower back region. And then I'm going to ask you all to stand up and sit down. And as you do this actual movement, I'm going to ask you to use observation and awareness. Notice what's going on in the sensation of your hands. And then in a literally brief moment, I'm going to ask Esther to actually verbalize what she's noticing.
I feel like, well, there's tension coming from my neck, but I also feel like I'm leading with my neck. Like
Great observation.
Sit up, I'm like,
Yeah, great observation. This is great. I mean, because again, everyone's observation and awareness is very unique and personalized. It's very different. So with that, I'm going to ask you to come back to the table, and I'm going to do a little bit of a screen sharing right now. And here I'm going to talk about body mapping and why we need musicians need this. And I would actually even venture to say even office workers. But body mapping actually was discovered or cultivated by Bill and Barbara Conable. And I love Barbara Conable's book, How to Learn the Alexander Technique. That's a wonderful book to actually have. And they are both Alexander teachers, and unfortunately they've divorced since. But Bill lives in Washington State, and Barbara has moved and retired to the state of Connecticut. But again, Barbara Conable, Conable, and Bill and Barbara actually, and it's called How to Learn the Alexander Technique. And they came up with body mapping because they recognized that people were moving in the way they believed they are designed to move. And I think what we're going to do is take a couple of steps right now, because we're going to do some self-discovery, and then we'll apply it to the chair work again to see if there's going to be a difference. So as you can see here, why musicians need body mapping. I don't need to necessarily read through the whole thing, but as you can see here in this presentation, the different reasons as to why we would need body mapping. And what I'm going to do right now is actually ask you, before I'm going to leave this up on the screen, I am going to ask you guys to individually draw a couple of things.
Okay. Uh-oh.
And you're going to take your piece of paper and pencil, and I'm going to ask you to draw your idea of what your spine is. And I'm going to ask you to shade in, like as in like color in or something like that, where your neck muscles are. And we'll just literally, I think, a minute, just to take this in a minute. You don't have to be an artist. You don't have to be perfect. It's just your idea of what your spine actually is, the shape of it, where your neck muscles might be located, where you perceive them to be. And we're just literally going to take a minute, nothing longer than that. Some people draw a stick figure. Don't feel that you have to be an artist or anything like that. But it's just your perception of what your spine and where your neck muscles are. And the minute is wrapping up, literally. And I'm going to now pull up an image,
I'm looking at it.
right? I'm going to pull up this image,
Yeah.
and you can
Oh,
see here where I talk about the 6 places of dynamic balance. And if you were to ever take a body mapping workshop, which there's a lot of body mapping workshops that are being offered throughout North America and the globe, even online, by the way. Wonderful teachers, Jennifer Johnson, Amy Litgar, Leah Peterson. There's wonderful body mapping teachers that I can always point you guys out to as well. And they have developed it online, a platform online. So here we have what's called 6 places of dynamic balance. And Esther, you said something to me earlier about the core.
mm,
I actually want everybody to, you know, how we're so used to thinking of the core, like it's very popular in Pilates or yoga, you know, the abdominal region. I would like to invite all of you to pay attention to this, or I want to bring the attention to this dotted line that's going straight. You can follow my cursor. You can see this dotted line, and as you can see, the skeletal system is weaving in and out of this dotted line, right? Well, guess what? That is considered in the Alexander technique and body mapping your core. So
mm,
your core is going this way
Mhm.
from the sky down through the earth. And your skeletal system weaves in and out, which is a beautiful thing because it's not we're not as you can see, we're not made out of straight lines. There's no
mm,
straight lines within us. Now I'm going to take my cursor and point to 6 places of dynamic balance. This is the first place of dynamic balance. This is the second place, and the second place is actually your arm structure.
Okay.
And the third place is your lumbar region, which is why a lot of people have lower back issues. The third place is the hip joint region, the knee joint region, and the ankle joint.
mm.
Now, I'm going to actually ask you guys before I pull up the image of the spine, can you both individually point to yourselves where would you locate your spine?
There.
Yeah.
Yeah, like here.
Yeah, like
Okay.
maybe.
So I'm gonna invite you guys. Now, this is the part where I don't have my skeletal model with me, but I'm gonna show you this. I'm gonna invite you all to understand that it would have been correct as well to actually say that your spine is in the front
Oh.
and it's actually in the sides. Now, the reason why we don't have a concept of that is because we have a lot of mass in the
Mm-hmm.
front and on the sides.
Mm,
But that brings the idea of that we are three-dimensional. So we have
mm,
multiple layers of three-dimensionality within us. So your spine is round, right? You
yeah.
can see what the structure is. You can see here. Here's that on the right-hand side. You can see that line going down. That's where the weight distribution actually is in the front of the spine. Because most people they point to their spine in the back, and you're pointing to the prongs. Here, listen, guys, this is not an anatomy lesson, but this is something for you to actually know what your spine is made out of. And I find it took me years, even as a music student. This is why I wish I had this education when I was even in high school, that I took it to more serious just to prevent injury. You have to know what your spine is made out of. It's made out of discs and vertebrae. Vertebrae are bones, and discs are gelatin spongy material that acts like pillows or cushions for the vertebrae, which is kind of a cool thing. You have 33 vertebrae in the spine, but you can see the prongs in the back. This is what we're used to identifying as the spine. But you actually have the circumference actually is three-dimensional, so you can actually point to your spine in the front and indicate it onto the side. And it's a very strong entity within the human body, and yet very flexible. And I mean, it's for people who've gotten into car accidents. You've heard of slip discs,
Mm-hmm.
and that's because of a sudden trauma towards the spine. And clearly we can't walk around. I mean, we can't, we can prevent as best as we can, but we want to continue to think about having a healthy spine. And I think it's worth your while individually, for those of you who are watching and our hosts, to actually explore what is the spine, what is it made out of. Usually in a classroom setting and a presentation, I actually have a model of a spine, and I actually have people touch it from the top to the bottom, and also to understand how thick it's a lot thicker than you actually think it actually is. And that's the lumbar region for the lower back region, which we'll speak to about in a moment. But I'm going to ask you guys right now, can you point to me where the top of your spine is? Even when you're seeing this.
I guess I could point in the front.
Here.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is self-exploration, by the way. And those of you at home are watching, it's self-exploration. Where the two girls are actually pointing to is, I would say, a 99.9% of presentations, everybody points to there. So that's a pretty good thing, by the way. I'll admit it. When I was a student of this work, I believed that the top of my spine ended here.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys are you're ahead of your intuition is very, but I will say, let's locate where the top of the spine is. And it's going to actually create the first joint. It's the first place of dynamic balance. It's your atlas. I'm going to ask you to find your earlobes, and you're going to take two fingers, and I want you to feel that bony protrusion there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then you're going to you can actually do it with your thumbs, or you can do your first finger, whichever way you want, and then you can go to here. I'll look to the side so you can see. And I'm going to ask you to start going up and down. So the top of the spine actually is in between your ears and just behind your nose.
Oh, wow. Seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to do this movement incredibly gently, like really, you don't want it to be like moving all around, but
Rocking out.
actually just swivel side to side just ever so slightly, and then go up and down.
Yeah, I feel it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's the location of the top of the where the top of the spine meets the skull. And that's actually called your AO joint. You don't have to memorize it. It's just something for you to actually understand. This is the structure of the spine. And you can see from my cursor, that's that top vertebrae. If you were to actually see it, I think it's the most neatest thing about how magical the human body actually really is. Because I say magic, it acts like a ledge for the skull. It's the coolest thing. If you really get a chance to see a model spine and the connectivity with how the skull actually rests on that top vertebrae, it acts like a ledge, and it's like that's what allows us to swivel. Muscles are the ones that facilitate movement, but structurally the bony part, you're just like, it actually rests. It's really magical, the human body, when you get into it. This is a view see, you can see the ear canal here. You can see where the skull rests on that top vertebrae right there. You can see the top vertebrae right here where my cursor is going side to side.
Like by your teeth. Like
Yeah, yeah, it's really neat when you think about all of that. Here's the skull, the atlas, and all that. And we're going to talk about your neck muscles. And oh, if I was there, I would actually be able to point to it. So we're gonna take
one day.
one day it'll happen. But I'm gonna pull up this. I'm gonna pull up this image, and this is, as you can see, the muscles of the neck, and you notice that it's plural, and each muscle group actually has names. People have heard of the trapezius, right? That's part of your neck, your rhomboids. You have. It's kind of like the United States. It's one entity with different states, like, or as I used to live in Canada, it's like, different provinces with one entity sort of thing. Here you can see the neck muscles, and this is where you can see where my cursor is. A lot of us actually point to thinking that that's the top of the spine, where that's a joint. And that's why a lot of us have a sensation of contraction in the back of the neck muscles, because we think that there's a joint there. And I'm not saying that we're intentionally saying, oh, it's a joint, but we think that that's a joint, and that's where a lot of contraction and neck pain actually tend to come from. So if you actually are able to think about releasing the neck muscles, and you're knowing where the top of the spine really actually is authentically within, then you're going to prevent a lot of contraction in your neck muscles. But let's take a look at how you look at the length of your neck muscles from behind the back of the skull. Look how low it goes in your back. Now, if we were to make a comparison, look how it goes into the front. So your neck muscles are a lot lower in the back of you than they are in the front. They come towards, you have neck muscles that attach to your collarbone and to the sternum region right there. It's sort of I like to think of this as a velvet curtain being draped over a bust. That's the way I think of neck muscles. You have many layers of neck muscles, and they're complicated, and they're one of the strongest group of muscles within the human body. The neck muscles and your thigh muscles are the strongest. And that's, I think, from evolution. It's like run, like you know but and the neck muscles have to be by design to be very strong,
Mhm.
because otherwise we'd have be floppy all over the place and we wouldn't really survive. But you can see even the how you have neck muscles traveling up the spine right there. So you have deep postural neck muscles. So it's a very complicated, very beautiful thing entity there. So I'm
It's
pulling
also
this up again.
interwoven.
Yeah.
Pardon?
It's
Pardon?
also interwoven. Like I think sometimes when I think of my body, I'm thinking of it as like, okay, piece, 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 piece. But like
Yeah.
seeing all these pictures and how everything is so intricately like weaving in and out. And even the thing you said about the core, that it's like going through everything and yeah, it's really cool.
And see, the thing is, when you're thinking of the core, so I'm turning to the side. I don't know if you can see me because I'm wearing this dark shirt.
Mhm.
Most people are like this.
Yeah.
That's
That's
Now,
me.
me. That's me.
but the thing is, you again at the top of the hour when we were talking, I was saying, get yourself into a good posture. Everyone does this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Usually, the lower back is like compromised. People grab in their thighs and gluteus muscle, and there is a tension in the neck muscle. But if you can learn to release the neck muscles, your whole entire system can
Oh
actually,
yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
release away. So what I want to do is just to give you an idea. Now that we've located your neck muscles and the top of the spine, and we've actually indicated where the top of the spine actually is, I'm going to ask you guys to take two fingers and put them by your ear canal, and I'm going to ask you to pull your head back and down. I'm turning to the side. You guys don't have to turn to the side. I'm going to turn to the side, and I'm going to pull my head back and down, and I'm going to ask you guys to produce the sound ah. You can say ah.
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 Notice how that sounds and feel without judgment. Don't judge it. Just notice the sounds and feel. Now, what you're going to do is use a little bit of Alexandrian theory, and you're going to use the power of the mind. You're going to release your neck muscles. Now, you now know where your neck muscles really actually truly are: front, sides, and back, three-dimensionally, right? Here, there's another example of three-dimensionality. And you're going to release your neck muscles, and you're going to imagine that your head is rotating on a metal rod, right? The tips of your fingers are connected in thought. And I'm going to ask you now to say ah,
Ah.
Ah.
and notice how that sounds and feels. So if you need, those of you who are watching at home, if you need to do that again, just take a moment just to self-discover. Just pull your head. Imagine that the fingers are attached like a metal rod, right? And they're connected, and you're pulling your head back and down, and you're going to say ah.
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 And then you're going to use your imagination and the power of the mind to allow your neck muscles to be free, so your head rotates on that metal rod, and you're going to say ah again.
Ah.
Ah.
Notice the difference. Can you both act? You can put your hands down, and actually, can you share what your experience was?
I definitely feel the second I was more aware of the fact that I could be more relaxed,
Mhm.
and I think my voice was lower than the first time.
Yeah. I think yeah, it's like a different
That's the biggest difference for me. That's the lower
yeah,
voice.
I noticed that too, I think in myself. Yeah.
So this is great because remember what I was talking to you. We're made out of multiple dimensions of three dimensionality. We have the spine three dimensional. Your neck muscles are three dimensional. You noticed using the power of the mind, instead of scrunching down, you can release your neck muscles, but now you know where the relationship of the neck, head, and torso are now in a much more clearer way. So when next time you find yourself like this, you can release your neck muscles, your head rotates forward and out, and your spine has the ability to lengthen. Why? Because of what it's made out of. Your spine is made out of vertebrae and discs. Your head is about 10 to 15 pounds of weight that compresses on that. And if your muscles are in a state of constant contraction, that's where you're going to have some repetitive
Mhm.
problems. And that's why, as an upper string player, like being a violist, I actually had to work on my chin rest and shoulder rest that was actually much more natural for me to be like this instead of picking up the instrument like this and constantly thinking that's normal. I now am more in what we call in a state of balance and ease, effortlessly, because you're combining this all this material with imagination. You know, you're interwoving that. So again, we're gonna move on now to the legs, and then we're gonna do imagination exercise in a moment. But I'm gonna ask you both to actually stand up,
Okay.
and I'm gonna ask you, and all of you at home, please feel free to do this as well because this is self-discovery. I'm going to actually ask you guys to point to where your hip joints are.
Uh, yeah, I don't know. What are the hip joints? Here? I guess here?
Okay, let's discover this all together. I'm gonna ask you guys to make light, gentle fists, and you're going to go towards. No, no, you don't have to stretch your hands out, but you're gonna point to the. You're gonna go towards the bottom of your. You're gonna make the gentle fist, and find that bony protrusion on the side of your legs.
Yeah, there it is.
Lower. Esther, lower. Yeah. Yeah. Do you find the bony protrusion? So you're going to be there, and then you're going to gently open up your hand, and using the padding of your thumbs, you're going to let the padding of your thumbs go by your jeans pocket. And you're going to march, and Esther, you can be a little bit, yeah, there. And then you're going to march in place. Start marching in place.
Oh, yeah.
Do you feel movement under the padding of your thumbs?
Yes,
Yeah.
we do.
That's where your hip joints are.
Ah,
That's something for you guys to consider. This is going to play a pivotal role to when we go back to the chair work. So you guys can come back to your chairs.
Yeah, I was way too high. I was like up here.
yeah, I
Right,
don't
right. So, because that's what. But you see the reason, the validity of actually knowing the body mapping, knowing your authenticity from within. So to the right, again, I'm referring to the spine. Here's the core in the front. The weight bearing portion of the spine actually is in the front. That's why it's really important to understand you have a spine in the front, sides, and back.
Mhm.
This image, this is what we call sitting in upright balance. You don't have to. This is not a posturing. This is not a position, but it's something to understand where we're talking about balance from within. Here, I'm going to show you when the difference of the weight distribution when you're standing as opposed to when you're sitting. And I don't know if you can see this clearly, but you can see that, imagine here's all the spine. When you're standing, the weight is distributed to your hip through your hip joints, right?
know. Mhm.
When you're sitting as you are right now, the weight distribution is going to your sitting bones.
Okay, yeah.
You see that, right? So where I'm pointing with my cursor there, that's that hip joint. So it's a ball that goes into the socket of the pelvis. In the Alexander technique, we always say functionally your pelvis is part of your torso. So there's an illusion that happens because your legs are intertwined with your torso. Because if you look at if you touch the back of your lower, the sacrum area, that's where your leg muscles go. So your leg muscles are higher than the bone part of your legs, and your torso is low. I mean, you can see how it's intertwined in that way. Here, well, I'm just going to show you this here. I'm just going to pull up this image. I think it's interesting, factually, to know that a pelvis is a pelvis, but if you see the male pelvis on the left, you can see the shape of it is very different from the a female pelvis. And from what I understand, there's 21 differences between a male pelvis and a female pelvis. And it's for natural reasons. So that's just, but a pelvis is a pelvis. We all have pelvis. We're human beings, all of us. So here, I want you to see
Oh wow. Yeah.
this is the hip joint from the side. You see this little where my cursor is going? That's the this is, I'm being fancy when I say this, but this is called your greater trochanter. And that's that bony protrusion that you were feeling on the lower sides there. But then you can see, and then you should know that your hip joint angles up and forms a ball that goes into the socket. You can see here on this pelvis seated, the sitting bones, where you can see from that image that I'm using from my cursor there. I'm going back to this. Um, Usually, I would ask you guys. I mean, I have to be honest with you. If you ever were to take a body mapping workshop, there it's for 6 hours. It's a 6 hour workshop, and you really are going through exploration. Here, I'm giving you a taste for those of, especially for those of you who are watching at home, just to understand that it's self exploration. And I said in the beginning, I mean, we have to think of ourselves as Olympic athletes. We're, you know, we have to know that we are movers. This is based on somatic work, the study of human movement. Usually, I would actually ask you guys to um, draw your legs, what your leg bones actually are, and all that stuff. But for right now, this is how your legs are, and I'm just giving you a visual, just so this way you have it. Again, with a body mapping workshop or a private lesson, we really would have you draw your idea of what your leg bones actually look like, and then we actually go through the authenticity of it. Um, your knee region, we actually don't have a knee. We actually have a knee region. There's no such thing as a knee. You cannot point to the human body and say, I have a knee. Because,
Really?
so if you can see here where my cursor is, this is a fancy thing to say patella, but that's your kneecap. You can see that the femur, which is your upper leg bone, and you can see the tibia. You have two lower leg bones. One is the fibula, and the bigger one is the tibia. But these are bones. These are separate bones. There's not an anatomical thing to say you have a knee. A knee. You can say a knee joint. You can say
Wow.
region.
This is
And
mind blowing to me right now.
oh wait, I mean, if you
I
guys
cannot wrap my brain around this.
I mean, if you really were to, I'm just gonna. I hope you guys that are watching at home, as well, it's not confused. But I do hope that you do explore looking up body mapping in conjunction with the Alexander technique. Alexander's technique. We're gonna get back to the movement in a moment, but um, this is body mapping, and it's really self-discovery. That it's a 6 hour workshop that teachers give, and or quite frankly you can study in privately. But just to give you an example, this actually kind of blew my mind. So remember, you have two lower leg bones, right? One of the bigger one is called the tibia, and I'm going to pretend that this is the tibia. You have the femur, which is the largest bone in the human body. It's the continuous bone. um, Most people think when they're sitting and walking that the relationship between the lower leg bone, the tibia, and the femur are doing this.
Mhm.
And in actuality, it's supposed to be this. If you look at it, the tibia has grooves on the top, and the bottom of the femur actually is rounded, and it's designed. That's why I say the human body is magical. It's fascinating. So your thigh muscles should not be in a state of contraction. There has to be a gliding in that very big bone to go over the tibia. It's pretty mind blowing when you actually consider all of this movement. But I think the legs in our discussion today need to be addressed, just so this way you understand that there's a mapping that we actually have to understand. Where is this all, you know oh, this is one of my favorites, is understanding your foot.
Ah,
You actually have
a
three
lot.
joint you actually have three arches. So most people, here's the three arches. You don't have to memorize the names. But everyone knows about the inner arch of our feet, right? Because we all wear shoes. We actually have an arch on the outer part of the leg, and we actually have an arch that goes across the foot. I don't know why I said leg. It meant to say foot. Um, on the outer part of the foot,
Yeah.
right? We have three arches in our feet, so that creates a little bit more buoyancy. It's not so rigid and grippy in the
Mhm.
feet. And I think the legs in part of the conversation are a very, very important thing to talk about, because as musicians, even cellists, we forget about our legs. We're so used to.
Oh yeah.
So I use the word global. You want to think of the
Mhm.
entire system globally. What we're doing is dissecting,
Mhm.
but really it's about putting the pieces of the puzzle back together globally. So now in your chair, I'm going to stop the screen sharing because I've gone through a lot of all those images there, just to give you a little taste of academically of what body mapping is. But I'm now going to ask you guys in your chair to close your eyes. And I'm going to use imagination right now. I'm going to speak to you, and we're going to do a imagination sensory exercise. Because now I've shown you what your skull is in relationship to your spine and where the actual top of the spine is. We've talked about the neck muscles, and you're briefly introduced the idea of your legs and everything. Let's see, and you again, let's refer to your spine. That's the central, that's key. You want to make sure that your spine is buoyant, and you know that it's made out of vertebrae and discs. So what you're going to do right now is you're going to imagine that there's a crane right behind you. And this crane is actually suspending a 25-pound cement block over you. And that cement block is slowly going to be lowered onto your head, slowly and gently. So it's you're sensing this cement block getting closer to your head, very easy. And at this point, I want you to start to begin to feel the contact of this very heavy weight resting on the crown of your head. And I'm going to tell the crane driver with the to rest this on top of your head with its full weight. And at this point, I want to encourage you to feel how heavy this feels. Now, notice when there's a heavy weight on your head, your entire spine and torso can be affected and can really dramatically influence your breathing. Now, I want you to continue to feel that weight on your head, and you think, okay, now please, you need to take this thing off. So I'm going to say, all right, I'll signal to the crane driver and say, please remove that weight off their head. And at this point, I want you to now feel it lifting off, and notice your breath, notice your spine, and feel it as you're feeling really completely lifting it off and disappearing. I want you to feel it disappear. And I want you to notice what happened in your system when it disappeared. Notice your breathing, notice your sitting bones on the chair, your feet on the floor, and gently open your eyes. And I want to see if either of you, but of course, those of you, if you want to write it in the chat or whatever, can anyone share what they experienced with that?
Well, it was kind of cool, like, to realize how much power, like, your mind has, that I can, like, actually make myself feel those things.
Great.
I have to say I had a hard time because being with the camera on me, I had a hard time to really feel the weight. I was scared. I couldn't get, but one thing, so I couldn't really allow myself to feel the 25-pound weight on myself. It was too scary for me. I don't know. But one thing I did notice and I tried, but then when you mentioned something I'm not afraid of, the weight getting off, the first thing I noticed myself, I did this. The first thing I breathed in, like, without even, so I think,
I saw it. Yes, I saw it.
It was like, even though I wasn't really fully into this, I was too scared to really let myself imagine the 25. Maybe if you said 5 pound, maybe I would. The 25. But I did feel like when you said the first thing I did feel that it did affect my breath, in the sense that being afraid made me much more.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And the minute you said off, I just breathed it. That I did notice very clearly in my breath. There was a big difference.
Wonderful. I mean, and also, I mean, you're touching upon something else that, those of you who are watching at home as well, we holding the breath, and maybe we talk about anxiety. That's a whole nother thing we talk about in the Alexander body mapping world, about when you're going out to perform, a helping thing to regulate your breath. There's a whole study. Alexander was known as the breathing man because he was a Shakespearean actor.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that exercise that we did before? Do you remember way back in the beginning of our conversation, I said, remember the dates he was alive, 1869 to 1955. I think towards the end of his life, where he was not performing, that's when the microphones were coming out. He was pulling his head back and down because there was this belief system that you had to reach the last seat of the mezzanine. So he compressed himself, and he didn't realize it. And that's why he noticed himself over a period of 9 years that he was doing grotesque movements when he was observing himself in the mirror, to say, wow, he's doing that. But he noticed it was even subtle even when he went to speak. And that's why he was known at the later part of his life to be very well poised, because he was very well integrated. He mapped himself internally to walk around with grace and poise, quite frankly, in an effortless way. So he didn't have these necks and cranks and, cricks and crannies and all that stuff that most of us tend to have. I mean, I sleep on my back. He was very adamant in saying, you just sleep on your back. So this way your vital organs are open as opposed to on your side or your
Oh,
stomach.
I am not a back sleeper.
Always sleep on my
I sleep on my stomach with my head turned like this.
Oh, no, no, no. I mean,
Yeah, right?
yeah, because you're compressing. You're compressing your vital organs as opposed to when. So it took me about 8 months to actually train myself. I had to have many pillows underneath my knees and in between my legs, and just so many pillows to help me, because I was a thrasher. I was one of those where the blanket was in Connecticut. I was one of those, like, yeah. But then I actually calmed down. Like, people who actually observed me sleeping, they want to throw a rose on my chest because I'm just like, you know, you know, that's the way I've trained myself. But I actually wake up very peacefully. But I can't imagine being on my side or my stomach anymore. But it did take about 8 months of actual participating, because we're an instant coffee culture. We want results immediately. This imagination stuff I'm giving to you, we're getting pretty immediate results. But when you're working long term, it really is participatory, that you want to explore, experiment what works, what doesn't work. That's why I admittedly say it took me 8 months to be able to finally quiet down, and with my sleeping pattern and everything. So I want to do another comparison, and then I want to go back to the chair work in a moment, because, well, I'll give you some Alexander directions actually. So I'm going to ask you to, we're going to do this. It's a thinking and lengthening exercise, but I'm going to ask you to close your eyes again, and we're going to pick, one side. Your arms are to the side. We're going to actually use your right arm. We'll just use your right arm, and just in thought. So don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to, it's just a matter of, I'm not going to ask you to move. I'm just going to ask you to have imagination and stuff. So I want you to, with your right arm, your eyes are closed. I want you to think your hand as an arrow falling into the earth. And your forearm is the shaft of the arrow being drawn down by the arrow. And your elbow is like hail following the arrow. And your upper arm is like the rain dropping into the earth. Notice your breath. And you can gently open your eyes, and I want you to extend your arms out and compare the two arms in front of you. And notice to see if there's any more space.
My right arm is way longer.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Look at
Yeah.
that. Wow.
And some people might not have an experience. I mean, there's no right or wrong, but what we're doing is looking to see.
Look at that.
That's crazy.
I'm very suggestive.
Hey, I mean, some people might not have an experience. Those of you who are watching might have an experience, but we're really using imagination. We're combining that and integrating for a result to happen, and it's done in a very indirect way. So you can see that no one's massaging you, but we're asking your mind to get in there and speak to your inner self, which is kind of a cool thing. Now, Esther, I'm going to ask you to go back to the chair, the white chair. And those of you watching at home, just make some space. But we're gonna go back to the chair work. So it was a lot of information that I gave to you guys that you probably didn't realize, self-discovering about how long your spine actually is, where your neck muscles, well, where your spine is, how long it is, what it's made out of, that it can be compressed. You know that your head is about 10 to 15 pounds of weight that's compressed on top of the spine. You now know where your neck muscles are. When you free the neck muscles, your head can rebalance and allow you to be on your core, right? Remember, your core is that invisible line that goes from this from the galaxy straight down um, through the earth. There. That's not to be spiritual, but I'm just giving some things to attain from. I am going to ask you to come to the edge of the chair a little bit, and remember the bottom of your you remember the bottom of your pelvis, which is your sitting bones, right? They act like a rocking chair. So what I'm going to ask you to do, not quickly, but I'm going to ask you to lean forward and then come back to neutral. Now I want you to notice what's happened. You can have your hands on your thighs, please. And I'm going to ask you to lean forward again. And notice what happens in your legs. Can you release in your leg muscles? And then come to neutral again. And we're going to keep on adding instructions. Now, when you're leaning forward, I'm going to ask you to notice your breath, but what's going on with your neck muscles? So free your neck muscles, leaning forward and releasing your legs. And you're just leaning forward, releasing in the legs. And notice if there's a difference. Is your back widening as you're doing this? You can come back to neutral. So releasing in the thigh muscles, letting your spine lengthen, releasing in your tongue, and your hands are not gripping. Your hands are not gripping in your thighs. So you're going to now lean forward, releasing in your thigh muscles, your neck muscles, your tongue, your breathing, and notice your feet. Can you have more of a connectivity in your feet? And can you quiet the back? So remember, as we're going back and forth, very incredibly slowly, you remember where the hip joint is. So you don't have to involve your lower back. You're not bending from your lower back. You're letting the hip joint rotate very gently from within. You're going back and forth. Notice your connectivity of your feet onto the floor. And I'm going to ask you what we're going to do right now is you're going to let your arms to the side, your hands down to the side. And what you're going to do now, I don't see your feet, but you don't want your feet very far apart, but you don't want your feet too close. Maybe hip width apart, shoulder length, right? Esther, I think maybe a little close. Yeah, just a little bit. Your feet can go a little bit more. Yeah. No, that's too much. That's too much.
There.
Yeah, perfect. So now you're gonna have this mantra, as we say. So you're gonna say, which is primary control, which is a bit of Alexander jargon. You're going to allow your neck muscles to be free, balance your head on the spine, and you're gonna lean forward just to come to stand. You're not gonna think much more of it. So let your head go to the ceiling. You have to pivot over your knees, and you're gonna physically actually come to standing. Okay, now notice anything in your knees when you're standing. Could you have your right foot come a little closer to your left, to the center? Just a little bit. There you go. Now, breathe. Now, notice that might have been a little bit different coming to standing. And I want you now to lean forward from your ankle joint and your whole body. And now what you're going to do is bend your knees apart, and you're going to come to sit down.
Okay.
And that's another. And by the way, you're bringing up a really great thing because in Alexander lessons we have to think of the word trust. So you have to trust that there is something from behind you. There are people. I was one of them in the beginning of lessons. I used to be like, "Is there a chair?" But we want to create familiarity and a safety net. That you want to make sure. And now what we're going to do is, without gripping in your thighs, I'm going to ask you to lean over your knee joint. Lean over your knees as if you're coming to standing. Aha, notice that there's a difference in your back, right? You can drop your nose just a little tiny bit. Yeah, so you're getting rid of any tension in the back of your neck. You can slide your feet back a little tiny bit, your heels back, just a little bit. Yeah, there you go. And guess what all of us are doing? All of us are actually remapping internally, right? We're letting go of muscles and righting them. And now what you can do, Esther, you can actually just come to standing. Let your head lead to the ceiling. Notice your breath. Notice your tongue. Nice. Now, I can see it. I'm going to point out that the knee region was significantly less hyperextended coming to
Yeah.
standing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you now to think of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. So you're going to lean very slightly forward over your toes, just a little bit, tiny bit. And with that, you're going to bend your knees to come to sit down. Lean forward, bend the knees, come to sit down.
Yes, the chair is good.
Good. Now, what I would love for you to I would encourage a little bit more when you're coming to sit down. I don't know if you can see me. I would like definitely a little bit more of a pivot forward. Yeah. Yes. So you notice how you stood up right now, which was great, and then knees apart. Yeah. There you go. Do you notice the difference with that?
Yeah.
And I hope that all of you guys are exploring to come to stand up, but you want to internalize where are your actual major joints. So
Yeah.
you're not bending from your lower back. That is by the way, the lower back, the lumbar region is multi-jointed. That is often referred to the third place of dynamic balance. It's the only place that is not a major joint. This is a major joint. Your arm structure is a major joint. Your hip joints, knee joint, ankle joints, major joints. But the third place of balance is multi-jointed. Because of why? Because that's the definition of where bone meets bone and the vertebrae are touching. So you have several vertebrae that are touching. So it's multi-jointed in that sense, if that makes any sense to you,
Yeah.
right? So I think we should just experiment coming out of the chair just a little bit one more time.
I'll get closer to the edge.
Yeah, and you can slide your heels back just ever so slightly. Yeah, just there we go. Arms to the side. And I want to encourage you, all of you that are experimenting at home as well, to create space underneath the armpit. And you can look up just a little tiny bit, just a little bit. Yeah, you want to create head balance. And now you're just going to simply lean forward over your knees and pause. And let the knees fall apart. Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to grab in your thigh muscles. And then push your feet into the floor as your head goes to the ceiling, releasing your tongue, breathe and come to standing. Softening behind the knees. That's it. That was even better.
Woo! Amazing performance.
Exactly, exactly. But coming into the chair should be just as fun, by the way, because coming up is a little bit easier, but we're learning to release the musculature in the legs, allowing the spine to be long. So now you want to think the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and you leaning forward in space very slightly. You're not gonna lean forward to the point where you fall down. You're just leaning forward ever so slightly. So I'm going to ask you at the same time to let your knees bend apart and come to sit down. Now, I saw a major difference. I don't know what people at home are experiencing, but Esther, can you actually verbalize something? Because I'm gonna verbalize what my observation was after.
I think sitting down this time was much better. But I think the reason it felt so weird was because I was like, you want me to sit down, but you don't want me to lean back. You want me to lean forward and sit down. Like it felt so weird because I was thinking like, isn't sitting down leaning back? But then I was like, oh, I realized it's like I'm leading with the wrong part of my body. I'm not leading with my back. I'm leading with the hip joint. And once I thought of that and leaning forward, then it makes sense because you're leading with this.
I mean, well, there is no leading. If you were really to talk about Alexander's work, I mean, the neck and the head lead. There's
Mhm.
always that imagery that the head is floating, leading, not the string. That's from bad ballet teaching. There's no string pulling your head up, but the neck muscles need to not. You need to start with the neck muscles. If you free the neck muscles, you rebalance the head on top of a lengthening spine. That's the mantra that you're always looking for.
Mhm.
But what we did today was we located where the truth is about where our neck muscles are. We learned where the skull and the head are on in relationship to the spine.
Yeah.
If you happen to notice, I'm going to point something out to you, and I don't know those of you who are watching at home. Did you guys happen to notice if you came into the chair lighter?
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't you didn't chuck yourself, or there wasn't a thud, right? So that's why I was saying you want to start to actually make a comparison from the beginning of the chair work getting this information, self-exploring, palpating, understanding certain things. In the body mapping workshops, they actually have you palpate, drawing, palpate, feel, use your kinesthetic sense. You know, you're really getting all this, and then you make a comparison to the movement, and it's going to make tremendous change in your life. Really, it's going to make tremendous change in your life. So, I mean, I do want to go to the floor if we still have some time. And
Can I ask a real quick? We had a comment. I think this is what, so Michael Fossum Orchestra just mentioned in a comment the same question. Is it a roll from the hip as opposed to a lean from the chest? So this
no,
is kind of what you were answering, that it's neither, right? It's neither one of
no,
those.
it's actually no, because that's the one thing that I have to be very responsible in saying. That's why I pointed out where the sitting bones are. They are there in the they're the bottom of your pelvis, and they act like a rocking chair in movement,
Okay.
right? But if you guys happen to notice, I was referring to always like free the neck, let the
Mm-hmm.
spine lengthen, and if you're thinking if there's an opposite of direction of arrow in
Uh-huh.
theory, so your spine and head are leaning up, and your legs release away. Can you
Okay.
visually see that your legs release away, the head is going this way, so there is no leading with the
So you
chest.
so you're basically surrendering to gravity by keeping the balance around that. So you know that line that you were showing, that around which it's like, you know, builders have plumb line, sort of like that, where the that's how the gravity technically pulls us, right? So what you're saying to me, it seems like once I am properly aligned, then all I have to do is by, if I'm aligned correctly, then I'm just releasing tension, and the technically the gravity is helping me to go down. Is that what's happening?
I mean, to a degree, yes. I mean, then we get into the whole like gravity. I was going more for sensation about release more than compare. Like there is obviously we're working with and against gravity at all times. Quite frankly, whether you're sitting or lying down or walking. But as far as what I was trying to get for this movement to
Mhm.
happen, it's not like, I mean, sorry, Esther, do you mind using your chair again?
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting, I understand what you're saying. You don't want, you want to, for us to think of releasing rather than acting, you know,
Yes,
like,
correct.
so instead of force, we're using the power of releasing, sort of like that, right? So we're releasing rather than thinking of acting with muscles.
Correct. We're working on releasing because most of us are in a state of contraction anyway. So if
Yeah.
I can actually show you, I'm going to show you guys, and I'm going to pull up my pelvis again. One thing that helps me actually is, so you can see here, you see my cursor where I'm pointing to. Actually, I'm going to pull this one up. I think that this is better. Oh no, I'll go back to here. You see where I'm pointing to? The bottom is the sitting bones, right?
Mhm.
To be in a state of balance, you don't want, I want you, believe it or not, those of you who are watching at home as well, you see those two little holes there? Imagine that they're eyes. So you don't want to be leaning back where your eyes are pointing that way, and you don't want to squeeze your lower back where your eyes are pointing down. You always want to find that state of balance from from your sitting bones, and there is an actual state of balance. Your the curvature of the sitting bones, yes, they act like a rocking chair. You can go back and forth. You can rock and all that, but when you're sitting in a place of neutral, where Esther is showing you right now in a place of neutral, and depending on, of course, the surface of the chair, how hard or soft it is, but you really don't want to have your eyes in your pelvis lean like pointing that way in a state when you're sitting, when you're in a place of neutral sitting. They should not be looking that way, and they should not be pointing down, because if they're pointing down, that's when you're squeezing your lower back, and you can see that. So you,
Yeah, that's her.
does that make sense?
Yes.
Is that a little clearer, especially to our
Yeah, I think,
guest
yeah.
who was asking question? I hope that makes much more sense, or more creates more clarity.
Yeah. Oh, I think The question was about I messed up was while getting up. I think that was the
Okay. Well, while getting up, it's the neck and the head, and that's a mantra that you want to work on. It's like you can have aha moments, but as one of my teachers lovingly always said, we're never there. We're
oh yeah.
never there. So you're always saying, okay, you can allow your neck muscles to be free, so your head can go forward and out off the tip of a lengthening spine. As my head goes towards the ceiling, my feet, which have those three arches, which are bouncy, buoyant, they are making more contact with the floor.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
So
Like
there's an opposite pull if we speak, if that makes any sense. I hope that answers more clarity as well.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, I messed up the question.
But when you're in a place,
Thank you.
that's why I was having Esther sitting there because she seems to be well balanced sitting down on the chair. Her pelvis is not tucked in and it's not overarched as well. So remember, you have eyes in your pelvis, right? And you have eyes in the pelvis and they're going this way. They're not angled this way and they're not angled that way. You want them to be in a place of balance and neutrality in that sense.
That's cool. I bet that's very good for cellists, especially because
Oh, yeah.
I think it's very important for you guys because you're always seated. And if I can ask you a really quick question now, because we're talking about seating, and I don't know, I just want to see if I am, because I've always been, when I was taught, since I was 7, my teachers always told me to practice standing up as much as possible versus sitting down because as far as violinists and it's okay. Oh, maybe I'll go since I'm asking. So I always feel like myself, I don't know if I'm just wrong about it, but I always feel that I'm much more balanced while standing up and practicing, and I have many more balance and tension issues when I sit down. So I always recommend my students to, anytime they practice, to try to do it standing up. Like, is that true, or is it just the conditioning, or?
I think that people should actually experiment both ways. So this is applicable to cellists and violin and violists. Bass players obviously is a different situation. Or if you're an office worker watching this, I think this is applicable. This is where you have to actually take the time to actually experiment with your chair. Meaning, do you raise your back, the legs of the chair? Do you carry? I actually know orchestral players who actually, my friends in the Met Opera and the New York Phil, like they all have these blocks of wood, and you actually you can go to a lumber place and actually bring a chair that you are always using, and notice that if all four legs need the extra height, or is it just the back two that need the extra height, then you might want to invest, which I specifically have because my, as we say in Portuguese, the bunda is a little bony on me, and it's like it gets a little numb after a while, and I actually use a seat cushion. And then there's a whole plethora of seat cushions that are out there. Some have a wedge, some have more thickness. I know Gelco, GEL dot CO. They're pads, and they're a cooling pad, by the way. And and they actually make it for people who are wheelchair bound because for obvious reasons. But I have invested the time and just a couple of bucks on. I have an actual like pad. I don't have anything else except for just a pad. And unfortunately, I'm not in control when I go to play Phantom of the Opera or City Ballet. I'm not in control of my seat. So, unless I get there really early and try to like do something. But when you're at home practicing, I think that's something that should be considered as well. And I call that setup. That's part of your setup. When I stand practicing, I kind of wish I was told this when I was younger, but I come to discover, when chefs, when they have to wear clogs, and they also have these.
No, my husband is a chef.
Okay. But and then he would know this as well. The how do you say this? The runners. So it's like a padding that they have to stand on in the kitchen. I use it. I stand on it when I'm standing because it really gives me that sense. I mean, I went so crazy when I first had the releasing of my legs when I was standing for practicing. I said, I'm gonna use this in recitals. I went crazy because it felt so good to stand on a runner. And if you don't have that, you can stand on thick, gushy, how do you say this,
Oh,
rugs. So,
okay.
so because you want to create the tactile touch in the bottom of your feet. Remember, we have three arches of the feet,
Mm-hmm.
not just that one arch. So that stability, you want to think of big toe, little toe, and heel. And actuality, I didn't even go through that with the heel. It's like your heels are not exactly directly behind you; they're actually to the sides. So I mean, and I can actually quickly show you just so this way. I think that's irresponsible for me to just say words and not actually show you because you'll be like, what? Here you can see most people think that the heel bone is directly here, and you can see how the heel bone actually is more to the side.
Mm.
It's not directly behind you as most people tend to think.
Mm.
So your place of balance, big toe, little toe, heel bone. So it's something to actually consider um, when you're mapping yourself correctly and experimenting. And I hope that anybody that was at home watching this, can have the same experience as Diana and Esther were having. Just experimenting, like leaning forward, freeing the neck, internally releasing and internally rebalancing from within.
Yeah.
So that's something to consider as well.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm assuming we have some time to do
Yeah.
lying down
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay. So everybody can do this. I just wanted to make a comparison to like how you were sitting and standing. It was a very natural thing to do, and as we progressed, we actually body mapped some things. We self explored, and then we made a comparison at the end, and boom! Now we have results, right? And you
Yeah.
notice again, it's not massage. This one, I know I did say to actually have some books. We don't need any books for support from behind the head. I'm just going to ask you guys to lie down
Okay.
on either your yoga mat or um, and with this one, this is going to be a bit of a range of motion sort of thing with our arms because we didn't talk about the arms. And body mapping the arms are fantastic. We talk about how many joints there actually really are. We talk about the function of the actual bones in our arms. As any of you guys are lying down, you have a choice to actually have your knees bent, or you actually have a choice to extend one leg or both legs out. It's basically to be comfortable. um, yeah, so you can have one leg or both legs bent or both legs straight out. It's completely up to you. Now what you're going to do is make a T. You're actually going to make a T out to the side. And I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. I know I did not show you an image of the tongue, and this is going to be a mantra that we're going to have with movement. So you're going to hear me say this over and over again. Releasing your tongue from under the tongue. And I'll say that over and over again. And you just want to explore what that means to you, for better or for worse. I mean, I should have been able to pull an image of the tongue. You guys would be very surprised that your tongue is just not in your mouth. It goes into your throat and it really widens. So I suggest YouTubing an image of your tongue, just so this way you really put it more into perspective, what I'm saying. So again, you release your tongue from under your tongue, and we're going to work with the digits, and we're going to do each arm separately as well. So the first digit we're going to work with is our thumb, and you're going to coordinate your tongue and the movement of your arm with the leading digit. So I'll try to demonstrate at the same time, and you're going to think of your trajectory, your arches, right? So we're going to start with the left, and notice and rest how when your arms are in a T, and notice the quality of your hands, and we're going to make a comparison to that after this. So you're going to lead with your thumb, and your arm is going to extend out and to the center of you in the front, just like this, and you go back and forth. So you're leading with the thumb and the tongue, and you go back down, extend out, And again, you do that several times, and your tongue releases from under your tongue, and you repeat the movement actually. Yeah, you're doing this continuously, and your thumb is leading with the tongue, and notice any gripping that you can let go of as you do this, and you're breathing. And your tongue releases from under your tongue. And now what you do is you're going to get the right arm. Your right thumb leads with your tongue. Think of the trajectory, the arc to the center of you. Breathing. And you're doing this continuous movement. And your tongue releases from under your tongue. Great. So now what you're going to do is uh, you're going to turn your head side to side, but with your eyelids closed. You're just going to lead with your nose and your eyeballs, and you're leading. You're not going to squeeze in your neck muscles. Just go about 5 times side to side on each side, and you're leading with your eyeballs and nose side to side. And notice your breath, and notice the quality of your tongue in your mouth. Can you release more in movement? And then now what we're going to do is go with your first finger, your first finger. And we're going to go from the left side. And the first finger and the tongue they're moving in harmony together. And you release your tongue from under your tongue. And it's a continuous movement. And think of your trajectory. And releasing in your legs. And then what you're going to do is the right side, leading with your first finger in conjunction with your tongue, breathing, and the movement is continuous. And you're going to remember to remind yourself your tongue releases from under your tongue. And notice your breath. Notice if your back can expand a little bit more. Great. So now what you're going to do is leading with your eyeballs. You're going to go turning your head from side to side, and really pay attention if you can lead with your eyes and nose. Don't lead with your chin. It's leading with your eyes and nose. Really go back to where the top of the spine is. Do that from side to side about 5 times. And remind yourself you have that top vertebrae. Can your skull rotate side to side? Can you release in the neck muscles, front, side, and back? Can you coordinate your breath and releasing in your tongue? Yes. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use the left side, and we're going to use the middle finger. So the middle finger leads, and releasing your tongue from under your tongue.
Easy to forget how heavy our arms actually are.
Yeah.
Think of the arc. And then we're going to now use the right arm. Releasing your tongue from under your tongue. The middle finger leads with, you want to explore that movement. Can you release the tongue as you're moving? Releasing the tongue from under the tongue, and coordinate your breath. And can you allow your spine to lengthen? And then, when you finish that movement, I'm going to ask you to, leading with your eyes and nose, turn your head side to side 5 times. Make sure that you're leading with the eyes and nose and not your chin. See if you can free the neck more. See if the range of motion moving side to side gets a little more in your rotation. And then now, what we're going to do is with the left arm, leading with that fourth finger. Well, those of us who are upper string players, uh, the ring finger, yes. Leading with the ring finger and the tongue. You want to make sure that that's being thought of as well in the movement. Think of your trajectory and notice the length of the arm. It's becoming less cricky.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to switch over to the right arm. Release your tongue from under your tongue and explore the ring finger. Release your tongue from under your tongue. Breathe. And then you're going to again, releasing with your neck muscles, lead with your eyes and nose, side to side. And those of you whose legs need to be adjusted, you can adjust your legs for whichever way you need. But go side to side about 5 times, leading with your eyes and nose. So notice if your eyes go ahead. You want to have your eyes and nose move at the same time. And now we go back to the left arm. And we're going to lead with the pinky, but really think of your trajectory, releasing the tongue from under your tongue, and your pinky and tongue are leading the movement. Your arm is following. Pinky leads with the tongue. Notice your breath. Great. Now we'll go to the right arm, leading with the pinky, and notice the trajectory. Your tongue releases from under your tongue. Great. So now what you're going to do is leading with your eyes and nose. Turn your head side to side about 5 times. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is pause in the middle. And I'm going to ask you to notice your breath, notice your back, notice your legs, notice your arms. And I'm going to ask you to roll over to the side. Doesn't matter which side. And you're going to go more child's pose. For those of you who know yoga, you can go into a child's pose. Release your neck muscles. Yeah. Yeah. And you're just going to actually be facing the floor now. Roll over to your stomach. And then drop your head. Your head is really the head. Yeah. And then you're going to use your arms to push. Leave your legs bent. Use your hands. Yeah. And your head is the last to come up. Your head has to be looking down. Yeah. Just using your arms. Let your head go down. Your head. You've released the back of your neck muscles. That's it. Now, your hand, just wait there for a moment and listen to the words. Your hands are going to push yourself up to standing, but I am going to ask you to let your head be the last to come up. So you're uncurling the spine and your head can go into balance. So you can use your hands to push yourself up to standing. You might want to take a foot. Yeah, put one foot in front of you. Your head is the last to come up. You can drop your head more. Yeah, there you go. And you can push yourself up to standing. Your head is the last to come up, and then you uncurl. There you go. Now I'm going to ask you all to walk around, and anyone who wants to chat, write in. But Esther, if you can start just to walk around the room and just describe how your arms feel in conjunction with the rest of your body.
They feel really light.
Does your arms feel lighter?
Mm-hmm.
Do they feel a little bit? I'm asking everybody. Do they feel a little bit more integrated?
Yeah, I think I have more awareness of like where they are.
That's great. So everybody can come back to their seats.
Great job, Esther. Woo! Applause, everybody.
Yes. Yes, a round of applause, round of applause.
Wow, it's amazing.
So that, for me, I think that basically concludes an introductory Alexander presentation in the sense that those of you who know about the Alexander technique, this could have been a review and hopefully it was more enhancing. And those of you who don't know anything about the technique, we discussed who he was, what he discovered, how it can be applied to you. On a personal experience, I was inspired enough to become an Alexander teacher because I wanted to have the tools for education, especially for the little kids, and having a good setup for the chin rest and shoulder rest, and and also when I'm playing late night shows and all that stuff and doing these exercises, mind body integration, and know that when you work with somebody in person, they do put hands on. It is not a massage. Again, it's not manipulation. Our hands, our trained hands, are there for suggesting space, length, width. That's what we're suggesting for. And there are a whole series about breathing coordinated exercises that can be explored. And doing the body mapping workshops, I really encouraging people to do body and seek them out. You can look at the Association for Body Mapping, and there's tons. They're domestic all over. And the people who I really love are Amy Litkar, Jennifer Johnson, Claire Stefani, Leah Peterson. There's some really top-notch. I'm doing body mapping as well, but you can find them locally or you can connect with them. Also, Alexander teachers privately, I encourage that. So now I'm going to ask you just what we did at the top of the hour. how do you feel now as a adjective compared to when you first sat down?
Mm.
And if you any of you guys want to share, and feel free to type in anything.
Yeah, if anybody wants to type in the chat how you feel
That would be
now
great.
versus later. I was happy you asked about child's pose because that's like one of my favorite yoga poses ever. It's just so comfortable and like I love like I think and it works really well in that context because it really is helping you like move upward. But yeah, it's I definitely feel more light like and I feel that balance in the spine like here.
Right.
And at the beginning I was feeling I think kind of disconnected from my body, like tired because it's just been a busy weekend and like a busy week and I have a busy week coming up, so there was like a lot of like I think stress and like I think that was translating from my mind to my body, but it's now I feel like I'm more connected. It's good.
Great.
Wow. Amazing. Of course, I didn't do all of the,
Mm-hmm.
but I do. At the beginning, I said I was happy, and at the end, my word was relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's so.
Yeah.
Definitely, I try to stick to just one word thing. But I even by watching Esther go through this, I was being aware of just by imagination because I'm not brave enough to do this on camera.
Oh, it's
But I could even by just watching her, I could kind of my body, virtually was kind of feeling those muscles, what I would be feeling if I were doing it. It was weird. And so even just watching someone do that really affected me. So I'm definitely going to, I think this is so wonderful. We're going to have this whole workout or whatever it's called, like it's there in its entirety, kind of cycle that you can go through, right? How can we use that? Can we do that daily or
Yes, yes. I mean,
what is that for? Could you tell us?
which
The one that the floor
the
routine, and
floor.
of course sitting up and down, I understand that, but like the routine that you had to do her that you had her do, it was so mesmerizing, and I was wondering how can we use that?
Well, I mean, I'll give you, I think that you can actually, this is something I would encourage you guys to actually do every day. And I'll give you a little bit of tips to do. First, I would actually go on YouTube, watch an MRI of somebody singing, and you can see how the tongue actually is. Because most of us map our tongue just in here.
Mhm.
In actuality, our tongue actually goes into here and it expands. And that's why I was saying to you in the beginning, it's like, and for whatever it means to you, relax your tongue or release your tongue from under the tongue. And the more that you educate yourself where your tongue actually really is, you'll actually have that mental clarity when you're actually speaking to yourself. Then, when we start off with the left. There's no specific reason, but I well, there is a specific reason. I'm right-handed. I'm
Mhm.
dominant on my right, so I wanted to start with the non-dominant, and that's a particular personal choice. Those of you who are left-handed, you might want to start off with the right. You just want to, and what we're looking is to create symmetry.
Mm,
We were going by each digit. You notice I included the
yeah.
thumb, so we were going through each digit. If you have the time, I actually would the trajectory in the movement. So you're leading with your tongue and that specific digit. You can
Mm,
do what I counted was 5 times,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when you're on your by yourself and if you have a little bit more time, it's actually even more. It's better if you do 10.
Okay.
mm,
It's better if you increase the movement. So you actually have to allow yourself like a good half hour to actually do this. And you're
Good.
going through each digit, but you notice by when you do the two digits on either side that you have to include the neck, head, and torso relationship in this. But did
mm,
you notice how I was talking to you about your eyes?
mhm,
So usually, I bet you the next time you can notice when you say "Hey" and somebody goes like that, you'll notice that they lead with their chin. In
mhm,
actuality, you want to have a coordination of your eyes and your nose. And then even when I say that, most people, their eyes go really fast. So you want to have your eyes and nose moving at the same time. You'll start to notice a quality in your neck muscles,
Mhm.
not to be in a state of contraction.
Yeah.
And you now know that top vertebrae with the that's the AO joint that you can explore right behind. You can remind yourself, you can even tell students, like, nod your head up and down, side to side. You can do it either way, the thumb here, whatever, whatever is comfortable in that sense. You want to remind yourself where the AO joint actually really is. Then you go to the other digit and you do the other arm trajectory and you turn side to side. The next digit, then the other arm, and then you turn side to side and you do the whole thing. You want to remind yourself about your breath. You want to
Mhm.
remind yourself about your legs. But as you're doing this, some of you guys might have noticed that your back started to widen, and there was you might notice, oh, I forgot to even make a mention to you guys. You're the At the beginning, when most people are like this, but usually at the end their hands are much more expanded
Mhm.
out. That was something that you want to be noticing, um, when you're doing this by yourself.
Amazing.
And it's actually the use of your arms. You're coordinating your tongue, because guess what, everyone, we don't think about this, but every time we're moving and doing something, our tongue,
Mhm.
if we're not careful, gets tight.
Yes, that's so true. When
Yeah.
once you start mentioning the tongue,
Uh-huh.
I just realized how much I tighten inside. Like,
And you
Mhm.
have the power to undo that tightness.
wow, that's
So,
amazing.
and you notice, Esther, like, your arms could have felt light, but we were coordinating, because when you're actually moving, that's why I'm saying your tongue needs to be in coordination with the actual digit, and your arm is moving as a whole. I noticed in the beginning it was like tighter, and then
Yeah.
you started having this fluidity happening.
Mhm. I noticed that too. I was like, I think I was like,
Hmm.
yeah, I was like, oh,
Yeah,
I
I
feel.
could see that too. It was like you were almost moving on air. Like by the end, when you got up, it was so different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I could tell, like,
And I
visually
was
there was a difference.
surprised. I was surprised at, I think at the beginning, I was surprised at the heaviness too of leading with the finger instead of thinking of, like, I think it made me think of how heavy my arm actually was. And
Yeah.
that's why it felt like, oh my gosh, like I'm actually.
And to be just to let you guys know, I mean, this is like I'm giving too much information, because it is we have to be, as teachers, we have to be careful with information dumping.
Right, of
But
course.
just so you know, it's food for thought for your self exploration. The first joint of the arm, your arm actually begins here. Um, that's the first joint, and if you actually go by the notch, and then you lift the other side, the other arm, and you go up and down,
Oh, yeah.
you feel movement.
Oh
That's the
yeah.
first joint. So I'm
Ah,
just gonna, I'm just gonna let you guys know this part of body mapping. We always say draw the bones of your arm, and then we talk about what the arm consists of from a skeletal point of view, and we say, you have one collarbone, you have a shoulder blade, you have one upper arm bone, two lower arm bones, a wrist, and a hand. That's what the bony structure of your arms are. And then if you're actually starting to move from here, because some people think that your arm begins there. It's like, nope, your
that's
arm
what
begins
I think. Yes.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, your the second joint of the arm is here. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's a whole exploration thing that you can do. And again, I need to be careful with too much
Yeah.
information dumping, but it's self-exploring, and you can actually know that it's beautiful self-discovery. And with the information that you have, you can use this to prevent and manage yourself. And if you do need to stretch and if you do need to get a massage, that's very normal and it's a natural thing to do. But as far as preventing injury and understanding how you use yourself, this work has been life saving for myself. I can speak from my own experience, but I adore it. And I also, there's a lot of wonderful Alexander teachers out there and body mappers that are out there. And, I'm available as well. But, I like to have the community know that there's a community out there. And
Eddie, can I ask you what would be, and of course we'll put all the necessary information in the,
Mm-hmm.
what is it called, description box.
Mm-hmm.
But should we or our listeners want to connect with you, is it even possible, or where
yes.
can they find you, in case if they have more questions, or maybe they would like to
Mm-hmm.
take lessons or whatever? How
Yes, I
do
mean,
they connect with
they
you?
can have my email. and my phone number. You can put it.
Well, we don't want to put it in.
Oh, my email. The email.
Okay, so we
Or
will put that
or
all.
IG chat or my IG. You can
So
put
we'll
like
make sure. So your Instagram, what is your Instagram again?
at Eddie Viola,
Eddie.
and I
Okay, so
spell Eddie with a Y, so it's EDDYVIOLA, and people can direct message me there.
Awesome. And yes,
yes,
and I have your email if you want me to put that
yes.
as well.
We will make sure and put everything in there. And it was just fascinating. I think apart from obvious physical benefit, what I loved about it, there's such a meditative quality to this. And I could just imagine, on my own, I just had this resolution in my mind. Hopefully I can keep it, but I would love to get myself into a habit of giving myself, just like I give myself time to practice every day as much as I possibly can. And sometimes I wonder if I had committed to kind of executing this routine, maybe every day, maybe every other day, but so that it becomes a habit. Imagine if, I mean, there's a memory, right? Muscle memory, there's mental memory. Imagine then doing that right before performance. Imagine, like, first getting your body, because your body definitely reacts. Imagine it could be one of those instruments to get you really focused away from the stress and into your body awareness, into being that self-contained kind of instrument that, rather than, I mean, I was just thinking that could be such a wonderful way, because we talk a lot of performance anxiety. I was thinking this way of really focusing on something that is very tangible, because that's the problem with meditation. Sometimes it's so intangible, it's hard to get out of, but this is something very, and these are my arms, these are
Yeah.
my fingers, my tongue, all of that. I just love that. And I'm going to try and to use it and get used to doing this, and then see if that will help me to put myself into the right mind when I'm stressed. Use that to.
I applaud you for that, because this is exactly what this is all designed for. It's not like a one-time thing and just forget about it. I mean, there's things that you can actually be able to do on your own. I will say that, as I mentioned before, there's Alexander breathing coordinated exercises that still to this day, well, not now because of the pandemic that we historically are living through, but up until March 2020, there's Shakespearean actors would come to the theater about an hour ahead of time and do constructive rest. So I gave you guys a little bit of a clue what we call constructive rest, which is floor work. And there's hands-on the floor, and it's really based on the table work. Actually, you work on a table. But they actually go through the breathing coordinated exercises, because it actually has a sense of calming you down and centering yourself as well. So there's breathing coordinated exercises, there's other imaginary type of exercises that you can implement on your own. And I actually do encourage, even though like it's a little bit more with the body mapping and the actual exercises to do, I say the more that you do it, the more that you can actually bring it to your own students. You're just only spreading health and wellness, like that's priceless in that sense. And of course, like with cello, is your how long is your end pin? Do you have those pegs that go backwards? All of us that use a bow, like how often do you refresh your hair? Because if you don't, you start compensating it. You are your own instrument sort of mentality, and that's what all this is. But based on today's thing, it's the Alexander technique and his principles, and giving you some mind body coordination. And hopefully now your core is this way, and you can weave in and out of your core, but you don't want to crunch, you don't want to squash your neck, and you can release through the power of the mind.
This is amazing.
Thank you
Oh my
so
goodness.
much.
Thank
My
you so
absolute
much.
pleasure.
Bravo. Bravo, Esther. My brave, courageous daughter. That's why I called her. We called her brave.
I
No,
love it.
but it was really amazing. So much value. Thank you, Eddie, first of all, for doing this, because this is, I think everybody understands how valuable this information is. And just to have you come and give us the gift of your time and of your expertise, we're very, very grateful.
Thank
And guys, please, if you're watching the rerun, if you weren't able to tune in, well, later, I'm speaking like Back
For
to
the
the Future.
future.
I'm in the future. So whatever. If you're in the future watching the rerun, please comment. You can still comment afterwards and let us know if you have any questions. We would love to explore. The most important thing, of course, Eddie, and what you said, you want to make sure and don't do anything drastic without talking to a professional, an expert. There's some probably beginning, but if you want to go in depth, it's always very important to be associated with an expert such as Eddie, or there were other experts you mentioned in the video. But I'm just blown away. I have heard about it. I've heard bits I have to be honest, I never had time to in-depth research this
Right,
or
right.
be at the presentation, just because we're so busy. And now I'm just absolutely very, very my mind is blown.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad at least it gets you guys thinking and to treat yourself as like Olympic athlete. I'm not saying that you have to work out like them, but I'm saying what you put in your body and are you taking care
Yeah.
of yourself and all that stuff. And that's what I cheerleading for.
Yeah, so make sure follow Eddie on his Instagram if you want to reach out. So we will put his information. Let us know if
Yeah.
you have any more questions. Anything else?
I think that's it. So we're not meeting next week.
Yeah, next
The
week
next episode is
yeah,
April 3rd.
yes, April 3rd, and I don't remember who we have scheduled.
Well, we have someone,
Yeah, we
so
have.
we will update you guys.
Oh, we have Francesca Leo.
Oh,
of course.
Francesca's coming.
Hello,
So
Francesca.
more
Yes.
wellness, more
So
talking about the
more-
body. So if
yes,
you really
wonderful.
enjoyed this
Our
talk,
friend-
you should come to the
Yeah,
Yes,
next
and-
one.
Francesca's wonderful. She's wonderful.
Wonderful. So yeah, Francesca has her Instagram is called Playing Without Pain. Again, all about us. I love the angle that you took at the beginning, but us feeling as athletes, because it's true. Our focus is not a physical focus, right? And I think that's why sometimes we forget, but I often tell my students when we work on their proper bow arm hold or setup, and I tell them this is very important, because just imagine how many millions of times in one rehearsal, like an average orchestra rehearsal, 2.5 hours with a break in between. Can you imagine how many times you did down and up in just one rehearsal? Now multiply that by how many rehearsals you have in a week, plus your own personal practice. The wear and tear is tremendous because we do so many repetitive movements. And so I'm so glad you mentioned that I never thought of that angle, but it's true. We are like athletes as far as our wear and tear in our muscles on one hand, but on the other hand, we're at the disadvantage because you're right, we don't do all the recuperative work that
Right.
athletes naturally are taught to do, right? So this is wonderful.
It's somatic works. It's the study of human movement, and we need to honor our human self in that way, especially when we're masters of many movement.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's so wonderful. So I wanted just to ask how it is you're in New York City, right? Or
Yes.
because how are things doing there? Are there any changes you're seeing? Anything improving more or less? How are you guys doing?
I mean, people are trying to look for the light at the end of the tunnel, and they're announcing outdoor concerts starting in April. But, Broadway is still quiet. There's just so many unknowns
Yes.
that's happening that I just don't even know I mean, I rarely go outside. I rarely go out, but when I do, I still am wearing my mask, and they're really intense in New York. Like they yell at you if you don't wear their mask and stuff. So,
Wish it was like me here.
I wear my mask and social distance, and I wash my hands all the time, and just keep on praying that I don't get sick,
Yes.
and then try to take care of as best as I can. But as far as life is coming back, we don't know because there's so many closed businesses. Everyone's like, "Oh, it's gonna come back." I was like, "It's gonna take a while.
Yeah.
It's gonna take a while to
So
come."
our prayers, guys, go. Everybody pray for New Yorkers. I mean, of course, we're praying for
The
everyone, but
world.
I feel like New York was just what happened in New York took the first biggest hit, and so
It was bad. It was very bad.
and with so many of my friends, artists and musicians, that it was such a large area of just concentration for arts, and music. And I feel like, we all should be praying and cheering for you guys. And thank you for sticking out, and just not getting sick
Yes,
and
I
being
know, I know.
alive and kicking and
Yes,
healthy. And so, guys, we're all continuing to like really cheer for you and pray for you. And we're hoping that soon things start turning, to the
turn
better.
around.
And thank you so much for finding time and energy to do this, because
Absolutely, absolutely. I actually have to get ready for another
all
IG
right,
live.
well, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Eddie, and everyone. Thank you for showing up. It was a wonderful, wonderful episode. And we'll see you hopefully a week from now.
All right.
Yes. Well,
Thank
thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody. All the best.
Same to you.
Ciao.